The year is 1963, and the Beatles are on fire. With Love Me Do dominating the airwaves and records flying off the shelves, the first symptoms of Beatlemania are taking hold. Later that year, thousands of miles away from Liverpool, in the town of Gary, Indiana, the king of pop would take the stage for the first time, at 5 years old, singing Climb Every Mountain. For both Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, 1963 was a year that would set off a chain reaction of events, ultimately bringing together and tearing apart two of the biggest names in music history. To understand what started the decades-long feud between Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, we have to go back to the start, literally, with the Beatles' first single. Though it eventually became a smash hit, Love Me Do allegedly had a little help reaching its ultimate height on the charts. In 1962, Brian Epstein reportedly purchased 10,000 copies of the single, which many people believe is the reason it went on to become a top 20 hit. Obviously not wanting to resort to such drastic measures for future releases, the group needed a publishing company that would promote Beatles music more effectively. Epstein's search led him to publisher Dick James, who won him over when he secured the Beatles' first national TV appearance with a single phone call. In Epstein's eyes, James was the man for the job, and it was James who soon suggested that the band would earn even more money, not just through his promotional efforts, but by forming a company of their own together. That company, Northern Songs, was a joint effort that was majority owned by James, and Lennon and McCartney each owning smaller portions. 2 years later, Northern Songs became a public company. Though the move made financial sense at the time as a result of steep taxes Lennon and McCartney would have faced, it left the Beatles with severely limited ownership of their own music, with John and Paul each owning a 15% stake and George and Ringo splitting an even smaller percentage. George Harrison later wrote 1968's Only a Northern Song about his dissatisfaction with the diminished cut he received in the deal. In 1969, Dick James sold his share to ATV, despite bids from Lennon and McCartney. Later that year, Lennon and McCartney sold their shares to them as well, giving ATV full publishing control of the catalog. More than a decade later, Michael Jackson visited Paul McCartney in London, where the duo recorded Say, Say, Say at Abbey Road. Though Jackson stayed at a hotel, oddly enough, across from the ATV studios, he often ate dinner with the McCartneys and spent a lot of time at their home in the evenings. It was during this time that McCartney showed Jackson some of the song catalogs he had proudly acquired, including the works of Buddy Holly. Jackson was immediately intrigued and wanted to build a collection of his own. Upon returning home to California, Jackson reportedly told his lawyer, John Branca, "I want to buy some copyrights, like Paul." Branca guided Jackson in purchasing a few catalogs, but the infamous turning point came during Jackson's Victory Tour in September 1984, when Branca informed Jackson that ATV was for sale. The exchange, as relayed to the LA Times in 1985, went something like this. The attorney says casually, "By the way, the ATV catalog is available." Michael Jackson looks puzzled. Branca added teasingly, "It includes a few things you might be interested in." "Like what?" Jackson asked. "Northern Songs," Branca replied. "You mean the Northern Songs?" "Yeah, Mike, the Beatles." Jackson did a full turn, jumped in the air, and shrieked. "But wait," Branca warned. "Other people are also after the catalog. It's going to be a struggle." Jackson replied, "I don't care. I want it. Please." At the time, ATV's catalog was owned by Robert Holmes, a court, an Australian billionaire who is well known for his business prowess and his stubbornness. Branca and his partner referred to the infamous deal as the Long and Winding Road. Holmes's asking price continued to climb, yet despite feedback from his advisors, Jackson was undeterred. Though Michael Jackson often sat silently in meetings, he scrawled a quick note that he passed to Branca under the table. "John, please, let's not bargain," it read. "I don't want to lose the deal. It's my catalog." In 1985, ATV's full catalog, 250 Lennon-McCartney songs, plus songs by Elvis, Bruce Springsteen, and more, were purchased by Michael Jackson for $47.5 million. Though of course it was a business deal, remember, Jackson was also a huge fan of the music he had just acquired. Asked by an LA Times reporter to name his favorite Beatles songs, Michael had this to say. Yesterday, he continues, Here, There, and Everywhere, Fool on the Hill, Let It Be, Hey Jude, Eleanor Rigby, and Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields Forever, and he realized that the list had stretched beyond 5. Can I make it my favorite 10? But still, the saga continued. Jackson turned around and sold half of ATV to Sony for $100 million, thus creating Sony ATV Publishing, with Jackson and Sony sharing 50-50 ownership. At the time of Jackson's passing in 2009, his assets went under the control of his estate, run by Jackson's attorney, John Branca and John McClain, a close friend of the Jackson family as well as a music industry executive. This was, to say the least, a bit of a mess. While the Beatles songs was a huge part of that estate, remember that these poor guys also had to figure out what to do with Neverland Ranch and all the eccentricities it contained. That took more than 10 years to sort out. Finally, in 2016, things pick up again when Sony agreed to purchase Jackson's full stake in the company for $750 million, giving Sony full ownership of the Lennon-McCartney catalog. In 2017, January 18th, Paul McCartney turns around and files a lawsuit against Sony ATV for the rights. A confidential settlement was reached in June of that year. While the details of this settlement remain undisclosed, in October of this year, Paul McCartney should be able to start reclaiming rights to the Beatles songs, bringing this whole debacle full circle. It would be an understatement to say that their relationship was tumultuous, but despite the tangled web of legal and financial issues, in the end, it seems that Paul chooses to focus on the positive. Paul says, "He was a massively talented boy, man, with a gentle soul. His music will be remembered forever, and my memories of our time together will be happy ones." Well, everyone, I wanted to make this story for such a long time because although I'm a huge Beatles fan, I'm actually quite a big fan of Michael Jackson as well. And I believe this story is important because it speaks of friendship that gets tested and ultimately leads to a place of forgiveness and understanding. It doesn't get much better than that. And as we've been doing recently, and you guys seem to be enjoying it, I'm going to leave you with another song from my brand new album. It's about something happy, but it doesn't always work out perfectly, kind of appropriate for this story. I do hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time.
When you start to understand, this house is made of mud and sand. Swan King, ooh, Swan King. When you journey through the blades, on and on through the glades. Swan King, ooh, Swan King. Who's that? Ooh la la. He's the Swan King. You feel your life's too harsh, you've got to join in the march. Swan King, ooh, Swan King. Cooking green and bullish frogs, sing you must join the bog. Swan
your king.